that better definition of what those projects look like for us. Along with Muddy Creek, that's given us a lot more definition on that project as well. As far as there are, in general, this is a little bit more aggressive relative to plant capacity relative to the master plan, which was, finished up a year and a half ago. This is the same or maybe a little bit less aggressive on the conveyance side based on the flows we've seen and just looking at the triggers for those individual conveyance projects. So a little bit of a mixed bag, but the 45 MGD presence on this, really drives much of the cost effort, basically all the cost difference between those looks at it.
What projects that existed are like significantly more, maybe 10% higher funding wise, or are all of them adjusted?
Sure. So the ones where we've had more detailed studies, so the rehab projects for the conveyance work, the projects that are currently in progress, we know the cost for those. And then the wastewater treatment plant projects for the expansion projects, we've got better defined costs for those. So the addition of nutrient limits is substantial. The overall wastewater treatment plant expansion, just at dollars per gallon sort of in the world just keeps going up. So those are probably the most significant there. The conveyance projects so far have held pretty steady to what we saw in the master plan and our individual consultant engineer estimates. In fact, those first three there are, we were thinking originally we would only be able to fund Lower Cottle Creek out of ARPA money, and all 8, 9, and 10, are now funded out of that ARPA money.
This might be more of a logistical question than a CIP, but do we have to approve this all tonight?
Well, so really the main purpose of this is, or the biggest goal of this is for the system development fee evaluation. We have to have an approved CIP for them basically to utilize and look what's our spending forecast. Again, this being approved by the board does not lock us into anything. The one thing I can promise,
but it always kind of does. That's we'll bring this up and we'll say, well, it's on the CIP, and we'll kind of go through the motions of that. I know we can always not do it.
Right.
I'm just trying to figure out what these all look like good projects.
Yeah.
From that. I just have no idea what this does to the rate structure because it's divorced from the budget. And normally I would see a CIP in parallel with our budget, so we can set our rate, cover the debt, and just kind of do that. And we haven't settled the 45, so I'm assuming that's at the good break point for phasing. So we'd have to go up to at least 45.
That is the one.
Maybe 9 more, but maybe not. Maybe a couple more. So that doesn't give me as much heartburn, but I know we're still working through that. I was just trying to figure out what is that catalyst, and it sounds like it's the system development fees.
Correct.
And there is a secondary piece to this as well. For example, Muddy Creek, we've talked about that. We do plan to go out with SOQs, for that effort. Some of these conveyance projects that are not yet underway with design or construction, we would probably go out with SOQs in the coming months as well. But again, like Chad's saying, and I've said, each of those we will bring to you individually. We can talk about those individually.
And the one thing I can promise is that this is not going to be an accurate document when we move forward a year, 2, 3 years down the road. We fully anticipate this to change each year as we move forward and gain more information, especially the feedback from the jurisdictions and what those drivers look like for the expansions as we move forward of how aggressive are we there or not. And some of that aggressiveness or lack of aggressiveness can impact some of those collections projects as well.
Does the structure represent the sequence there? Does that represent the priorities of WSACC, or is there just a different metric that we've sequenced that?
Correct. So we've tried to estimate with the best information we have, data or capacity wise, flow data, whatever, of the priorities of when they need to be timed, of when that need takes place.
I guess my concern would just be that we have the opportunity to comment and that we're not locking them in.
Yeah,
Or that we can add and amend or, you know, whatever moving forward. I think sometimes we get so busy and we lock in a CIP. And then
Well, in your
forget when we approved it and when it got on.
Well, and in your opinion, I mean, at what point do we have a discussion about impact on, you know, rates? And I mean, is that, do we wait until the next big decision and then decide? Or is that something that should go, to Rob's point, is that should go at least parallel or close to parallel with this?
Well, our goal is that Wendy and myself have talked through. Our goal is to minimize borrowing the fixed rate adjustments to the jurisdictions to the plant projects and try to utilize state monies, system development fees, and retained earnings as we move forward to fund the collections projects. And that's what's outlined here, that the biggest impact to the jurisdictions would be through the fixed costs of the plant projects that we've discussed over the last couple months. The remaining projects would be funded in mechanisms that would not have direct impacts on the rates of the jurisdictions. And so that's the goal as we move forward. Obviously, when we get into it, as projects prices come in, as we actually bid things, as that could be more challenging to do than we hope, but that is the goal.
well, and that debt service fixed cost increase for expansion is gonna dwarf any
Correct.
metric.
Correct. So
And you provided us the information just in general, based on what our discussions on what we end up asking for, what that debt service would be. So I think it's kind of there, just not in a nice tidy.
So we confident, so I guess a follow-up to all this, are we confident that we have the resources available for everything other than the new debt? That the grants are all in place or anticipated at a reasonable, and the cash reserves are adequate? I mean, all of that, we're confident is there.
Well, and I think that's probably the best way to summarize what the items in yellow are. We are confident until we get to the projects in yellow, that those are the ones that we don't know. Some things are if projects come in over budget, if system development fees come in slower than they have or than we anticipate, then those are projects that could be a challenge to fund through something other than debt. Is that fair to say?
Before we issued it, we'd have to do a rate study. And so you would have that information before you would go forward with the borrowing.
So if you look through there, there's, $45-50 million worth of projects there that I can't say that we can do without a potential borrowing, but I think optimistically, I think we'll be able to. But it also comes down when you go to do those borrowings, you have to have enough cash on hand and you have to have enough coverages. And so, you have to balance all of that. So out of 600 million, that's 45-50 million, about 8% that we're not sure on right now, but.
You still have, you're having to bake in some assumptions. One, system development fees continue to come in at the rate they were, and that we keep this, I assume you're starting with the system development fees as they stand now.
Yes.
We have $22 million right now.
And we kind of forecast on $3 million a year coming in.
Yeah.
We've been receiving in that $4 to $6 million range over the last couple of years. If we have a change, and I believe we will, to that system development fee, of increasing that fee because of the costs associated with this CIP, then that should be additional amounts. We don't have that built in here. We have the $3 million a year, kind of roughly built in.
I guess that's what I was getting at. When we talk about that, when you get back that analysis and we look at what that system development fee should be, it comes back to this again. It's all circular.
And yes, it
Is
will
there
have.
value to doing a preliminary rate study now before we're actually ready to issue debt? Does that have value?
We can, and our financial advisors have talked to us about doing that.
Right.
So,
I don't
We're
get some
happy to get that
clarity to
started.
some of this,
Yes.
what that looks like.
Our current system development fee calculation does not include the 700 million plant expansion currently, right?
Correct.
the expansion, we don't have any SDF in the planned expansion, so we're talking about the current.
Yeah, so
expansion.
the current system development fee that we have set doesn't include any of the plant expansion. I know this 20 million is not going towards it, it's going to other expansion projects, but when we calculate what the system development charge is,
There was some phase 3 and phase 4. I think it was just there. It was just phase 3. It hadn't even been broken into 2 phases at that point. And I think it was more like 140 million or something that wasn't the 200 million. It will be, there will be significant impacts to the system development fee for sure.
Another thing I'd like to point out on the conveyance projects and really kind of overall, progressive design build goes in its own way, with, the pre-construction services and then GMPs, for individual parts of construction. The traditional design bid build projects, we would bring to you first, as the engineering component of that, which is, a smaller upfront piece to get that design, get easements acquired, that sort of thing. And there is an off ramp, for each project there. If we want to set something on the shelf, after engineering, even if that's done, we can do that, and then come back for construction, later on. So we do have some flexibility with those.
Is there a possibility you could, in very easy layman's terms, go through these 19, not now, but prepare something that goes through each of the 19 projects and explain very simple terms, what happens if we don't do it? I mean, just simply in a 5-year window.
Sure.
If we take it off of this, and I'm not saying we do any of that, but we know what the impacts for the treatment plant capacity expansions are, but some of these others are at a 75% capacity now, and in the 5 years, they're clearly going to be over capacity and we're gonna have a problem, or is it about getting ahead of growth, and if you don't do it, it might impact this part of it. Something simple, just easy to, if you could do that, I think it'd be really helpful, just to help us get clarity on.
I think the individual project cost as it would impact our budget would be helpful as well when you do that, like everything in the, I don't know, Chad, you'd mentioned like the yellow's not locked down, but the yellows, or I'm sorry, the green on this, like those are all state grant funds. It's kind of like, why would you not? They're state grant funds. Whether we do them or not.
Those are underway.
Right. And so
Well,
like,
with
so
the
they,
exception of Muddy Creek.
Oh, yeah, exceptionally agree.
so those are kind of low hanging fruit that's easy, that you don't need much analysis. They're grant funds, they're underway, they're continuing projects. It's kind of the new stuff that would be financed, that would be the ones that I would want to look at, say, okay, what happens if we don't do it? How much does it cost? And I know we have like, well, 30 million here, or 10, 20, but what does that mean on a rate? As far as financing, how, what we're gonna borrow,
Sort of
you
like
have
a-
to make some hypotheticals there on what the rates would be and the term and stuff like that, but what does that do to our annual budget if we do a project, if we're gonna finance it, if we're not gonna pay cash?
And we've looked at about $100 million. The project's just $7 million annual debt service. That's what we've looked at through the big project.
Right.
So the projects in yellow totaling about 50 million would be about $3.5 million annual
And you
debt
can-
service impact.
and you can kind of prorate that out based on the cost of those projects. I mean, so instead of having like the big number, because I'm assuming this isn't everything or nothing CIP, like some projects could be taken off, some could be added on.
Right.
And so I understand like this whole list of 19 might have a certain impact, but what's the impact to number 13? What's the impact to number 8? That would be helpful to see what the individual budget impact of a project is.
And so to be clear, if it was a project like on here that was in blue or green or whatever, those won't have a budget impact. Okay, so we would just be looking at mainly the big plant expansion, which is what we've been talking through the last couple months.
Well, I think system development fee does have a budget impact. Like that's a revenue that we have. I know we're bringing it in, but we could spend it on anything. We don't have to spend it on those projects. The green, that's an outside funding. It has no budget impact. Everything else on here, well, Charlotte Water funded doesn't. So I'd say the purple and the green are of no significant financial impact, but everything else on here is a budget decision.
There are restrictions on our system development fees.
Yeah, they have to go to capacity expansion.
Right.
But the goal
We
is,
have $600 million, $700 million on here of capacity that we're adding that we have no system development fee associated to. So there's room.
but the goal is to do everything but expansion out of existing revenues, right?
Correct.
Or some new revenues.
Yes, that wouldn't have
It
a,
would have a rate impact to the jurisdictions.
that is the goal.
And whether we get there or not, that's a whole nother.
Yeah. And I mean, there's some things in here when we get into it, if, like, for example, the biosolids ash fertilizer storage processing is $10 million. If we end up doing that, Charlotte will pay a contributing cost towards that because they are 26.7% of the plant. So they would play a part of that project. We haven't broke that out here necessarily, but there would be some of that. They could potentially contribute in the expansion to 45, that could have lower that $600 million number some. Some of those will get tuned in as we move forward through this project.
So if we were to vote to approve this tonight, in essence, we're really just formally putting it on the radar. Yeah.
We're saying this is our plan.
Yeah.
This is our
It's
plan.
almost like our town's land use plan or our county's land use plan. This is just, hey, our map going forward and, you know, we can always deviate on the map if we have to, detour because the road's closed.
Correct. It does not authorize staff to do
Yeah.
anything or award any projects or any contracts.
I think there is some assumption though that budget year 25, 26, you're gonna do those, right? So like the Afton Run Parallel Interceptor has $1 million in this budget year.
Yeah. Again, that would have to be approved by the board. That would have to come to the board and be approved. The selection of a engineer and the beginning of that project would have to be approved by the board.
Is the, I guess the intent then, as you bring a project's contract to us, that's when we'll evaluate the kind of budget impact and the worthiness of the project?
Yes. If it has a budget impact.
Like that one, that would have 20 million, right?
No, that, we're not anticipating that having a budget impact. No, because that would just be design. We're just designing that project in 25, 26, 27. But construction of the 18 million doesn't begin to 29, 30.
We don't, do we have 2 million in the, well, do we have $1 million in this year's budget for design of Afton Run Parallel Interceptor?
No, it's not funded in this year's budget. It would come out of reserves or system development fee.
Right, so that's a
What's
budget
the-
impact, though, when that comes up, you're gonna ask for a budget amendment of $1 million to take out of reserves. But again, reserves, this is money that's competing for all projects, and I'm just picking on Afton because it is the biggest in the yellow, so that was and I think at that point, we're saying, okay, you're gonna bring at some point, say, do you endorse this project? And my question is gonna be, what are we giving up to do that project? Is there a better project? Is this the best project? I have no idea.
I feel like
If you didn't do it,
from what you've presented, any alteration, let's say we talk about Afton, we say, hey, we don't have the money to do that yet. That's not gonna change your priorities. It's just gonna shift all your timing, right?
Yes.
It's just gonna cascade everything further out.
And if these are grants that are coming from the state, unless there's some other restriction, you could pull up to 15% of that grant money forward in order to pay for design and engineering. So you may not be spending any of our money during that period of time.
This one.
I thought we were talking about the items in green.
No, we were talking about number 14 Afton Run.
yellow.
Oh, I'm
So
sorry.
this is cash we have on hand that we can apply to projects that we have not approved yet.
I was looking at the green item.
But we haven't done any real discussion on, is that a good use, or should that source fund, should the reserve funding go towards plant expansions and not have as much borrowing. For these projects, 100% necessary. Back to kind of Mike's original question is, what happens if you don't do them?
That's really the only question I need, and then based on those answers, could we have to figure out a way to do all this, or there's severe consequences. But I don't fully understand the consequences of not doing them. We know, but some are more urgent than others potentially, but I don't know that. That's the thing about water and sewer CIPs is we got to rely on you guys to help us understand
Right.
what the implications of this are. It's not like we're building fire stations that we kind of can see and touch and feel and know
Right.
the implications. Here it's
And
all
we're,
hidden.
we are looking at flow-based triggers, to the extent we can. We've only got a certain granularity of that data. But we are looking at flow-based triggers, for these projects. So for example, on Afton, on number 14, we have put a temporary meter, in that system, exactly at the downstream end of where that project would be, so that we can understand, we've got some meters kind of upstream and downstream, but they're a good ways away. So before we went out for an SOQ for that, we want to understand that, bring that flow trigger and that actual data back to you. And that can inform, your decision, on the urgency of the project, and the funding could be discussed from there.
Even if you categorize them, if that's easier, that, urgent, important, something to say, without having to give us a bunch of data, just.
I mean, it's prudent to have an updated CIP. My concern is you're getting a little ahead of our skis outside of budget, where it's like, okay, yeah, we have these reserves, but we're supposed to actually discuss that during a budget process of what our reserves want to go towards. And I don't know that we should push forward super fast on those 25, 26 budget year items that haven't already been approved. If they've already been in the pipeline and, this has been discussed with previous boards and we're just kind of doing it, that makes sense. But if we're adding a new project on and it's coming off of our bottom line, there should probably be some discussion of what the need is and where the funding source should come from.
And if I'm correct, Thomas, 11, 12, 14, and 15 are all projects that have been on previous CIPs.
Yes.
They're projects that have just moved up over the years. The Highland Creek, which is the Afton Run and the Mount Pleasant Force Main upsizing were direct results from master planning work that took place. That we've done more work and more metering on.
We continue to.
And we continue to try to nail those down.
What do you think's the longest running item on there?
Well, what do you mean by longest run?
The oldest one on there that we've, been discussing maybe for a few cycles and.
Probably the Muddy Creek.
Muddy Creek.
Expansion.
Right.
Yes.
Some of these conveyance systems, that are in progress, they've had a run up for those.
Yeah.
The others have either, like Chad said, been on previous CIPs or have come out of the master plan a couple years ago, or the I&I study for the rehab project.
I also want to make sure that I think that's everything everybody said is very valuable, but I also want to, like, looking at that million in the current year for Afton. I mean, there's a confidence that money will be there, right? Through extra system development fees or something. So I want to make sure we're not pushing and or moving dates of projects that are important and that staff has prioritized based on the concept that there truly is not money there. I mean, I think we don't know it's going to be there for sure, but we think it will be. So I think I just want to be careful. It's not big numbers until we start getting 28, 29. Well, there's a 27, 28 furnace upgrades that's sitting out there, but everything until then is not humongous. So I think based on conservative budgeting of system development fees, and it feels like that money's going to be there.
Yes. Well,
It's not there.
what is our current balance in system development fees and retained earnings?
Well, I don't have retained earnings, but 22 million in SDF, and then what we had given the board previously is that we had roughly $20 million that we felt comfortable using reserves.
So I think that project's yellow right there this next year, because we have to decide, do we use system development fees or do we use retained earnings? Which do we decide to use? Which pot do we come out of?
We've already-
It's not, is the money available?
Which is very different, I think.
There's an additional 30 million in yellow that is probably bonds. Or unless we're gonna, we said we've got 20 some in reserves, unless we're gonna build up reserves, but I don't see us building up reserves if we're spending down.
But if you jack your system development fee up, now you're generating potentially at a higher rate that maybe there is a decent amount of money.
Hopefully.
And you're 2 years out until the first real significant expense of $7 million comes out of that yellow, so.
14, 15, and 16, correct me if I'm wrong, you cannot use SDF for those.
No,
Or is it 14?
we could for everything but the rehab, we could use system development. So I'm sorry, 15 and 16, we could not. So those are,
Okay, and those are very small, so we
Right.
definitely have cash to pay for them.
right,
14 is an entirely new line, so it is.
I
yeah.
thought it was 3.
Wow, that time is,
There's another rehab project.
We can do.
Um,
Touch your lights on.
Yeah, so we've already approved the fiscal year 25, 26, right?
The operating budget,
The operating budget.
but we have not approved these projects.
Capital, so they would be capital
It's 9.
projects.
So 9, 15, and 16 are the
And 9 is
rehab
grant.
related projects. And 9 is already in progress.
Gosh, that comes back to what my original question was, you're authorizing some projects tonight. If you do this now, we've discussed, we'll have an opportunity to come back and stop it.
I
But
think we're authorizing a sort of a temporary bucket for the projects that we have in that column. But there's still, before they go through the spigot and get flushed into reality, there's still one more final check,
we're not gonna do 1 million this year and then not do the 18 million in 29 and 30.
good, but stranded cost is not
Not
a
a terrible
Well, yeah.
decision.
I mean, if it gets pushed back 1 year, and then at that point, you're looking at a whole new system development structure where it's like, okay. Now our input of, revenues looks totally different now because we've authorized a new structure there.
So Afton looks like a traditional design, easement acquisition, and then construction. So what would really happen? That first 1.017 is gonna come to us next as a design contract?
Well, it would probably be a 2 million would come.
Sure, the whole thing, So which at that point, you haven't spent anything
Right,
if you say no.
right.
Why
And-
is,
It's weird to go through a bidding and
yeah,
or an RFP and then say no. Like,
That's where I'm like,
odd.
I kind of wanna.
And that design may come back and say, well, with the 18 million said we needed a 36, but we actually need a 24. And we don't need it till 2031. We don't need it as early. I mean, it could tell us a myriad of things. There's some rehab could take us, stretch this out a little bit further. There's a myriad of things that could come through that design process and system analysis that could dramatically affect what happens out in future years.
is the reason there's a gap just in item 14 of 2 years is just to get a handle on the cost for those last 2 years when you fund it? I mean, is that primarily what's going on there?
So the area that Afton parallel line would transit through is a crowded spot. And there's more development interest there all the time. So we did see value to the layout and the easement acquisition process of that. We feel confident that line will be needed into the future. But we saw value in the design and easement acquisition.
Sooner
during
than
that
later.
era. Yes, sir.
See,
And
that's a great explanation for why to spend that money now. That's what I'm getting at, I guess, is
Sure.
understanding that kind of nuance helps us understand why you would need to do that. Why? Because just looking at it, I'd say, well, just delay that 2 years and let's push it off. We're not gonna fund it till the end of the cycle. But get it? Makes sense. That's the kind of detail I think would help us.
And I think that everyone anticipates the right-of-way acquisition of being very challenging on the project. There's a tunnel of 85 involved in this project. So there's gonna be, from a design standpoint and execution, it's gonna be an involved project.
Probably educational, question for me. It's currently served by 15 and 18-inch diameter sewers. You're not pulling that out, right? You're adding another dedicated 36-inch.
Yes, and the design, as we understand it for these, the kind of conceptual level that came from the master plan. Was looking at these, these pipes carrying the vast majority, if not all, the flow. So there is some likelihood, like Chad was talking about, as we get into design, we see that parallel system in tandem. Maybe the new parallel line could be a little bit smaller. But that would all be fleshed out through the design process. We wanted to be on the reasonably conservative side.
Thoughts about how we proceed? I guess there's two options. One is to delay this until we got some of the details we've been talking about. The other is to go ahead and adopt it, because I think everybody agrees it's just a planning tool. But to Rob's point, probably we don't have a detailed discussion about the financial implications and the priorities. The same meeting, we're having to decide whether to move forward with a project. That's probably not ideal. That puts us sort of under the gun to, so. I don't know what your timing is on bringing back some of these projects this current fiscal year. But if there's a little bit of a gap, some time to come back with some additional discussion. But I'm okay adopting it personally. I tend to agree with Rob that we ought to have some of these bigger picture discussions before we decide on some of these projects.
Well, I think it's very fair for us to come back to next month's board meeting or the following month's more with the items identified, and especially, let's say, if we looked at 25, 26, 26, 27. So these first 2 years as very detailed of where those funds would come from and would they have a direct impact on rates, the fixed rate charge at all. That would be, I won't say easy, but that's something we can do. Certainly. So that's in hand and discussed before we show up in a later month with a request to move forward on a project.
And all that would be based on a current fee structure.
Current fee structure, current snapshot in time of the information we have at hand.
You said for the system development fee recalculate or consideration, they need these kind of numbers. I assume they can move forward with this as it's drafted.
Yeah, Wendy, how does that?
They're working on they're working on it now, so I guess it's maybe at the end when they're looking at all the other current assets and everything. I've sent them everything that they've asked for. They haven't asked for this yet, so I'm guessing it's at the later part of their analysis.
I don't think we're hamstrung and we mess ourselves up big time if we don't approve this till next month. I mean, I don't think we're hurting ourselves. I think we would obviously have to have an approved document before we could finalize a system development fee change and stuff like that, but.
I'm happy to approve it as long as we can get some further details. I'd also, like Mike said, like to see kind of the project full life. So I think some of these are probably, certainly the plant expansion is like 7 or 8.
Right.
So we can see what those values are. But I don't think there's a harm in adopting it and having something on the books, as long as we know, hey, we've got more information coming and we need that before we can approve contracts and stuff like that.
All right, any other questions? Based on that last.
Can I ask a clarifying question there? And depending on what the board does this evening, with the Muddy Creek Progressive Design Build, are we good to move forward, generally with SOQs for that since the funding is identified? Yes.
I'd say everything in green on here.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Concerns with that from anybody? All right, well, based on Rob's last comment, do I hear a motion to approve the capital improvement plan for FY 25-26 through FY 30-31?
So
Second.
Second, any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries.
And I do, before we move on that real quick, I do value any input that anybody has beyond this of how we can format this, display this. Do we need to go over the CIP quarterly with the board? what we need to do? The CIP kind of has a different life now for WSAC than it did 4 or 5 years ago. Because of the magnitude of the size and number of projects that we have on it. I can remember a time since I've been here, there was like 5 projects on the entire CIP. Yeah, and so it's changed dramatically. So the better and more we can communicate that with you guys in a way that's useful, please reach out. We can certainly do every 6 months, we can go through it and say, this is where we're at. This is what we think may change during the next 6 when we update it in a year. Be happy to do anything like that. So
I'm happy with how it goes throughout the year. I guess I'm just used to seeing it tied with the budget, so like in the spring, when we're starting to look at operations, capital, impact to that too. So, and they play off each other, and we're not just borrowing money for projects. We're not just leveraging rates for projects. We're leveraging it for, new staff that we're going to have to run some of these facilities and all of it. So I like to get that kind of whole picture of what's it going to mean? What can we afford?
well, as a board, would y'all like to see that synced back up?
Budget
and CIP approval.
I mean, it's always value, I think, but it's never that simple. To always link it, especially when we're using so much outside money in reserves.
Yeah.
It's not always that, but
Okay, well, we'll look at that.
I think it's valuable if you can.
Okay.
If I may, that would be easier moving forward. This year, we're waiting on a couple of those studies to wrap up, particularly the expansion related and I.
More information then.
But that's where we work.
Okay, good deal. All right, we had this sort of ongoing work session about the treatment plant expansion alternatives. Anything, Chad, that you want to facilitate a discussion on?
I don't. I did attend Concord's work session 2 weeks ago, I believe it was. Them, like most of our jurisdictions, I think we're having some very hearty discussion over the magic crystal ball of what's needed and what can be afforded and what makes the most sense, and as we move out into the future. So again, I just want to continue to state that I understand how challenging of a decision this is, how much is involved in this. My goal, Thomas's goal, this whole organization's goal is to try to figure out ways to minimize that cost, to reduce that cost and have. I would love to be able to one day show up and say, hey, guess what? It ain't gonna cost as much as we thought. I'd love for that to be the case. I'm not making any promises, but
Percent interest.
yeah. So continue to offer myself, Thomas, Wendy, anybody up for help. If you need any to interact with your staff or your boards, we're always available and can be available to come to work sessions or whatever.
The big 2 getting any closer to a number?
We, city council just approved, update of our master plan, which is underway now, and we're fast tracking it big time. So, yeah, we'll know more by end of the year, into early next year about where. And honestly, this, we're doing a rate study too, and the CIP, honestly, I'm glad we really adopted it because that's going to factor into that for us too. Like, well, everybody, I mean, there's only really a couple of pots of money to make this happen both in the municipalities and countywide. So it's affecting us all the same way.
We're making some good progress. I mean, I appreciate Chad coming and helping out. It's been very valuable, but I think it's been pretty eye-opening. We gave them a lot of historical information, looking back, I think 10 years, which gives us a good 5 years pre-allocation, and then the 5 years maybe almost since we've been doing this the new way. And it's funny because Chad tells us all the time, like, I've been here 17 years and flow's only gone up this much. Like that's like, when you look back historically, we're not approving. It was eye-opening to me that it's not hundreds and hundreds of thousands of gallons every year we're approving. I mean, we average like 300 to 400 a year. I mean, almost every year we were pretty close to that. So it's been interesting that I think we're finding out that ultimate number is maybe not as large as we thought it needed to be, which That might be a good problem or a bad problem. I'm not so sure. One thing I would like to say is that we did have some discussion about, I know we're trying to sort of get to a number so that we can get them rolling. There's been the expression of, this is not locked in, looking at the lawyer, this is not locked in until we sign something, right? Or till a political body does something. And there's a little bit of concern that came up with some of the, it's political season, right? And, how do we move forward and act on something that theoretically we're not going to have to lock into a signed interlocal for months maybe, right? Or even longer than that. So there was some concern is, could there be an inconsistency that pops up there that a community makes a decision and then come January, they want to change their decision, and how that works? Should we delay that until early next year, or do we just make sure we're aware that that could happen and make sure we're flexible once we give those numbers? I don't have the answer to that question, but a lot of money, a lot of money for a long time is tied to this. And until that commitment is made, it's not a commitment, I guess, is what, and I'm looking at ourselves just as much as I am everybody else. It's just, it's not real until it's real. So
Well, I don't think we will have an answer until first of the year at all.
that's good. We'll blame it on you.
If others make the decision, we're gonna,
Yeah, no, we're right there with you. I agree. That feels better.
yeah. But
And I mean, go ahead. No, you go right ahead.
Let me ask sort of an interesting question, maybe a no sense question, but a sense interesting. When we first formed as an organization, the county was really heavily involved in contributing toward the results that happened. But more recently, the county has contributed very little. It's been most of the municipalities who have put money into the process. I'm looking at all of those projects and thinking to myself, how much growth is that in the county? And all of those are, if we do all of those things, investment will come to the county. And the county will reap benefits from taxes that will be collected on those things. Should we be thinking about approaching the county to ask how they could play a bigger role, a role similar how they played originally when it was formed? Not asking to recreate the wheel, just saying, could the county be involved in some way when we look at these huge numbers? As you said, Chad, we can all remember times in which was only a few projects that was on the CIP. But now there is 20 more projects on the CIP. Maybe it's time to be asking Cabarrus County, what role do they see in this, and how will they benefit from these 20 projects becoming a reality? And is there some money that they should be contributing to make this happen? I don't know.
It's thought provoking. I've never thought of it in that way, but it's a great point, Mayor, where you do a major, at the grounds, the county will get more, tax investment from that than Concord will. Concord obviously loves providing the jobs and gets some property tax and stuff like, but certainly dwarfed by the county benefit on it. But it's never, I don't think anybody's ever discussed the economic impact to the county. So that's interesting thought exercise.
Discussed from the other side, which is as municipalities approve residential development, the county takes the impact of that. And we've done all the fiscal impact analysis that shows
You lose every time.
the county is losing badly, particularly after the decision the adequate public facilities was not legal. So it is a balance. I think that maybe the pushback you're going to get is that there is two ways. So some of this growth, yes, the county's benefiting from, and others, it's actually a negative.
Is that from the school facility?
Yeah.
But the reality is, whether you're opposed to the growth or whether you're in favor of the growth, if the growth happens, the county is going to benefit. The county is going to reap more taxes. They're going to collect more taxes as a result of all of these projects that are there.
And certainly from industry.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
from
just
industry,
from-
that's what I'm saying is even
Uh,
10 years ago, that
I'm
that
not
number was 16,000 a student,
Yeah.
so.
And I'm not even talking about things like jobs and income and wealth in the community that is being built because we're doing all these projects that are bringing people in to do that. So there's all kinds of additional growth and and receipts, I guess I would say, that the county is going to benefit from as we go along. So maybe it's time to have a real discussion with them about being a partner in this growth and this opportunity. I don't know how we started. But I think now is the time to do it. When we look at that and we see $600+ million that somebody's gonna have to pay for. It's not like it used to be when the numbers were small. I mean, let's just look at Muddy Creek. The county will benefit a whole lot more than the town will benefit from industry and growth that will come into that region of the county than the town will. So why shouldn't they be willing to put something into that as we look at that? And is some of those revenues, let me talk the side that you were talking about. Would some of those revenues be available to them to build schools with? I mean, as they collect more taxes for doing all these projects we're talking about, it's more cash that they have to build more schools as the growth occurs and the opportunity happens along the way. So maybe there's a positive side that we can just show them that it's to their benefit to participate in this. I don't know how much, I don't know how deep, how wide. I'm not suggesting I have any idea what that number should be or how they can participate. But it seems like now is a good time to be talking to them about that.
And I'm not discouraging those discussions. I'm just saying one thing you're gonna hear back some of these. You have to do that fiscal impact. It's different for cities and counties because of the responsibilities that each has under the statutes and
Yeah.
the services they provide.
Yeah.
Right, well, as towns grow, right, unincorporated areas shrink within the fixed boundaries of the county, right? So, I mean, I understand where you're coming from on the surface, then yes, the responsibility shifts from the county to the municipality if, you know, that 400 acres was annexed into a town, right? And so now the town is gonna take on the burden of that. But there's still county services that have to be provided, and if the density increases exponentially, which it will for a piece of property that size, then the need for services is gonna increase exponentially. You know, 400 acres is 700 homes, maybe more, 800 homes, and so now you're talking about all of the other infrastructure and impacts that the county has to bear and shoulder the burden of. So I like Rob said, I have not thought about it from that standpoint. It's a very
Man, let-
intriguing standpoint. It's definitely a thought process that isn't, you know, it needs to be exercised.
Let's take it all the way to the maximum. Currently, we have a 1 million gallon permit at Muddy Creek. So let's assume that we, instead of stopping at 0.66 that we're now talking about, that sometime in the next 5-year period, that it all goes all the way to 1 million gallons because the opportunity is so great in that part of the county to do that. That seems like that is a good thing for the county. And why would they not be willing to participate in making that good thing happen for that part of the county?
Well, how was WSAC chartered? You know, when we were chartered, right, and we were stood up as an agency, what was the funding structure? What was the responsibility back then? I mean, you know, has that changed as the
Yeah, so at
population has
that point,
increased?
the county still was a utility provider. So Muddy Creek's a great example is, again, the county still owns that property, still owns that plant, I assume, but and paid for all that construction. So the original Muddy Creek plant and the land and all that was all county investment, to your point. So at that point, they decided, well, this is worth it. Of course, they're operating the utility and we're saying we're gonna get that back in rates, which is the other factor of this is some portion of these costs come back to you in utility rates. I think to your point about, yes, as an area annexes, some of those services are taken off the county, but a county budget is 80% law enforcement, which includes the courts, social services, and schools. So none of that changes.
Yeah.
I mean, a little
any-
bit, law
well, yeah.
enforcement, a little bit, but in some cases, not at all.
If anything, the burden's just gonna increase as the population does.
I think you could have a limited agreement that if you're a county commissioner, I think it's a positive discussion to have on, when we first formed, we weren't doing major industry coming to the area. Major industry was shutting down. And so now you do have a hotbed of industrial development and industrial interest here from an economic standpoint. Let's take Harrisburg, for example. You know, if Harrisburg has a $400 million investment in industry coming in, that's going to generate, you know, some $250,000 a year for Harrisburg on the tax side of things. Forget the utility side. That's just a tax benefit. And we're going to provide not a lot of services. We're going to have police and fire and stuff like that, but we're not putting them in the schools. We're generally not doing lots of roads and not picking up their trash, brush, all that good stuff, stormwater. On the flip side of that, the county is going to generate about twice that. Or at least 1.5 times that in Harrisburg. So they're going to generate $400,000 in taxes, and they're not going to provide any hit to the school or any hit to the roads, and they're not going to do any services to them. So is there an opportunity for an agreement to be made to say, hey, if we're doing that, not houses are losers for the county, but if you're doing that, if you're bringing in a big industrial investor, is there an ability to take some of that future 400,000 a year over 10 years where you're bringing in 4 million? Is there $1 million of that available up front or an investment in a sewer expansion or a line being run?
Or
I think
engineering cost or.
Well, in the to what you just described, I mean, the county has participated in specific agreements for specific reasons. And I think generally it's the industrial non-impactful. I think they have a history of doing that. It's just how do you have a project you can say, hey, part of this is because of this, where they can comfortably understand the business case and it does make sense.
Yeah, you ask them for a capital contribution or something.
That's probably where it's more fruitful is to use some of those specific examples, because the county's entered into those agreements with Kannapolis, Concord, Harrisburg, where for specific projects. And what you're saying is we'll have the discussion more in general. Let's not necessarily a specific project, but we know this type of growth as it occurs, there's going to be costs, utility costs associated with it, and how would the county contribute to those?
it'd be nice to say if we have this one project type, that we have a funding source from the county that says, hey, we'd be willing to give up 10% of future property taxes for expansion for this type of thing. And we put it in our models, and you still have to go project by project, I'm sure, from a legal agreement standpoint to do something like that. But well, you got me thinking, man.
And some of that, so Harrisburg's a good example. I mean, except the money, some of that money went to you, is going to utilities and the joint project that the county and Harrisburg have.
Yeah.
But it's the cost of utilities for that private developer, not for necessarily Harrisburg's portion.
But the Farmington project, great example of a synthetic TIF that
And I think in the past where there's been an interest in some kind of incentive plan, but now it appears that the county commission has suggested that they want to ratchet back on incentives and not be a part of incentives. Well, okay, if you're not going to be a part of incentives like you were for Gordon Foods, you know, then maybe that money that you're not spending on incentive money could be spent on utility cost money. That is a role that you could play in the process. I don't know. I'm just looking for sources of money.
you just saw $1 billion on the screen, and he's looking.
Speaking of other people paying, so Charlotte, do we Where, do we know anything?
Okay, so I've reached out to Charlotte multiple times here. Ron Hargrove was the deputy director at Charlotte Water that was directly involved, that I worked with consistently on WSAC Charlotte Water issues. He has retired and moved on from Charlotte Water, and they're in the process of filling that position. So I do have contacts over there. That's not a problem, but getting direct answers, and he had been involved with it long enough and around long enough that he could kind of make decisions on the fly. Now that's not the case. So into the future, I think the best way to say it is they really don't know what they want to do. A lot of it's tied up on IBT, their capital plans and funding plans as well. When we look at them contributing to projects as we move, or being parts of expansions. That's why in this particular step, I just left that out because it would have been a total guess.
When would they have to, procedurally, when do they have to commit one way or another? Like, how long can they wait in this 9 million gallon expansion to decide they want in? Does that make sense?
I mean, that would obviously have to be made decision and be a part of it before any contracts were issued. But obviously pushing for this deal because we need to know the end of this year, first of the year, of what do they envision as being their desire to.
We'd like them on the same timeline that we are,
We
but
would like-
right.
We would like to. I mean, I imagine we may get something back. We feel there's a really good chance we're going to want to, or no, we don't think we're going to. We may not have a in concrete answer. But I think we'll have a good idea. Because same thing can happen there. You have political changes, you have staffing changes, and
And how do they legally commit to that? When they pay
an amendment.
to their agreement? Okay.
An amendment. It gets approved by our board and their council.
Obviously, these are completely different scales of numbers, but the Highland Creek parallel interceptor on here has majority Charlotte Water money.
Correct.
So I assume they've already committed to that, or?
Per the contract, yes, they already committed, because that's a parallel of an existing line. And the contract lays out if you have to expand or parallel or do major repairs or rehab, how that's handled and how that's funded. So that is part of that contract.
Good discussion.
Oh, while we're on this work session real quick, I did, talking through, at the work session with Concord and everything, this is such a challenging decision to make for the jurisdictions, and for WSAC to make recommendations, because it is almost like we're living in two parallel universes. We have the universe of what's actually flowing at the wastewater treatment plant. And then we have this whole paper capacity, projects into the future, needs into the future project that both lists are 100% accurate. Like they're true, they're real lists. But for example, right now, updated today for 2025, we have less average day flow right now in 2025 than we did in 2020. Right now. All right. Now 2020 was a very wet year that really pushed us into expansion mode. But it just shows you we've also connected a lot of stuff in the last 5 years. And our flow is slightly less, I mean, very much slightly, but I mean, almost the same flow as we were in 2020. So it's a challenging game to play, because you have reality of what's flowing. That's true numbers, but then you have the capacity or developer control capacity. You have projects out there. Those numbers are real too. And it makes it challenging, and we understand that. So
I look at those same numbers, Chad, and I keep trying to find a solution, and there isn't one. Like, all the numbers are right. Yeah, it's like low in 22, and we're talking about building 45, and like that doesn't feel right. But also, I know those projects on my list are going, so I'm sure the projects on your two lists go, and it's just it. But when they come on, they're flowing way lower than we have to predict, but we're not allowed to account for that. And
Tough.
Frustrated as you are, sir.
It's tough. It's tough.
Anything else for the plan expansion discussion? Okay, any updates?
A few quick ones. One, and I didn't forget, Robin, Family Fun Day is coming up October 2nd, at Kannapolis Park. I'd love to encourage anybody that can. We will send a reminder out to the board. That's from 4 to 7 o'clock. You can drop in for 30 minutes. You can stay the whole time. There'll be hamburgers, hot dogs, like barbecue as well.
Be hamburgers this year.
Oh, okay.
Barbecue, hot dogs and grilled chicken. We are gonna have a sports surfer blow up this year that we haven't had before. We hope you'll come out and try to surf with us this year.
And a limbo contest with an ambulance right next to it.
Me and the mayor, my side.
Doing a Hawaiian theme and we're pretty excited about it. And we hope we have great participation from our employees. We normally do. And Village Park is a beautiful place to have it with the carousel and the train.
We have,
Can you surf?
Can I serve?
Yeah, you can get on this surf thing?
He's an engineer.
I'll get back to you on that one, okay?
we have 60 employees and we routinely have over 100 people
You do.
attend Family Fun Day. So it's a great turnout of our staff. It's fun to see in the 18 years I've been here that now I'm one of the older dudes that's there and watching all the kids run around. One time my kids were the ones running around, and last year it was like 20 or 25 little kids running around everywhere. And it was just, it's fun to see. It's exciting to see our staff's there with our family, with their families and stuff. So I would encourage you, like I said, we will send out more information to the board, but if you can stop by, swing through, we would appreciate it. That would be.
Mix and ice cream are the absolute best. You can ask Mr. Hennon about that. He can testify to that.
Absolutely.
And you can't beat the ice cream nowhere in Cabarrus County. So.
Can't be all good news. I don't have much information on this, but we did get an update today from Crowder Construction. They've been working in Aeration Basin 4, which is the second covered basin that they've got into, and have found some pretty significant, it sounds like, concrete issues with the roof of that structure that was not evident in Aeration Basin 5. I know no more than that really at this point in time. There will potentially be a schedule impact. There definitely will be a monetary impact. We have contingency, we should be okay there, but there could be a schedule impact. We will have more information as we go forward to just how significant it is. But this is probably one of the first, like, oh crap, ones that we've ran into in this project, and to be a couple years down the road, we'll take that as just, it is what it is. But we will update you through email or here at the next board meeting of what's going on with that. We did, as Thomas mentioned, receive the Muddy Creek expansion design, conceptual design, and that's being reviewed. Plan to bring that to the board next month. There was a little increase to the cost estimate, not dramatic, but there was a little increase to the cost estimate as they dial into that a little bit more. We will be looking at some value engineering options and different things as we move forward into that project, as we select the ultimate design delivery team. Last thing, probably everybody here knows this, but I just want to make sure that after many times talking about it around this board, Red Bull has broke ground. So it seems like for what, 5 years? At 5 years, we've talked about it around this table, and they have broken ground, and I think pretty aggressively broke ground. We had a meeting there, last week with their staff, and they're pushing for early 2028 being their opening timeframe there. So
I looked really closely at those pictures. I did not see Jeff in any of them. I didn't see.
I was out of town.
Sure.
I was out of town. They had, motorcycles, race cars, skydivers. It was impressive.
he was on the motorcycles,
It was impressive. They did it right.
but that's all I have.
Okay. All right, we'll open up the meeting for public comments. If anybody would like to address our board on any item. Hearing none, we'll close that portion of the meeting. We need a closed session. Do I hear a motion to go into closed session under GS 143, 31811, A1 and A6?
So move, Mr. Chairman. Second.
A motion and a second, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We are in closed.